with his mama.
If you don't need your mama kid instead of over here trying to cook something to eat.
Instead of trying to...
Why is there got to be a question about do I need to cook for the kids? Why is there a question?
And he don't never have to question. He don't want to question everybody's loyalty. But where is his loyalty at?
Right now, as you're watching this video, someone somewhere is broadcasting their life on social media. Maybe they're sharing a meal, celebrating a milestone, or having what seems like an ordinary argument with their partner. But what happens when that ordinary moment turns into something unthinkable? What happens when thousands of people become unwilling witnesses to a murder? On March 25, 2023, in Columbus, Mississippi, a Facebook live stream started like any other domestic dispute. A husband and wife arguing about money, loyalty, and responsibilities. But this wasn't just another relationship drama that would blow over by morning. Jeremy Brown had no idea that his final moments would be watched by strangers on the internet. He had no idea that his attempt to simply leave his apartment would become a viral tragedy. As he gathered his belongings, trying to de-escalate the situation with his wife Khadijah, viewers were tuning in to what they thought was just another messy relationship argument. The comments started flowing. People picking sides, making jokes, treating real human pain like entertainment. But this wasn't a reality show or a scripted drama. This was a 28-year-old father trying to walk away from a fight. The apartment was filled with the sounds of frustration and hurt. For children were somewhere in that home, listening to their parents fight about gas money, work schedules, and broken promises. Khadijah was streaming live, airing their private struggles to anyone willing to watch. Jeremy kept asking one simple question. What's the conversation you want to have? He wasn't being aggressive. He wasn't threatening anyone. He was a man who just wanted to leave peacefully, to go to his mother's house and cool down. But sometimes, the most dangerous moment in an abusive relationship is when someone tries to walk away. Here's what disturbs me most about this story. Thousands of people watched Jeremy Brown die that day, and most of them moved on with their lives like it was just another piece of content to consume. They saw a real human being lose his life, and then they scrolled to the next video. If you're going to watch this story, if you're going to learn about Jeremy's final moments, then you better be ready to honor his memory properly. Hit subscribe if you believe Jeremy's life mattered more than your entertainment. Comment Jeremy deserved better if you're not just here for the shock value. Or maybe you think murdered fathers are just content for your timeline. Go ahead and explain in the comments why you refuse to subscribe. Jeremy and Khadijah Brown weren't strangers to each other when they got married. They had history that stretched back to their school days. The kind of love story that sounds romantic when you tell it at family gatherings. Khadijah would later post about how they'd been rocking since middle school and high school, and had never stopped loving each other since the day we met. 7 years of marriage. That's what they were celebrating just weeks before Jeremy's death. On social media, Khadijah painted the picture of a couple who weathered storms together. She called Jeremy her lover, best friend, and wonderful, amazing husband. She talked about their ups and downs, their sad and happy times, but emphasized how they always remained together. But social media posts can be deceiving, can't they? Behind those anniversary celebrations and loving tributes, there was a darker reality that law enforcement already knew about. The Lowndes County Sheriff's Office would later reveal that Jeremy and Khadijah had a history of domestic violence. This wasn't their first rodeo with police intervention. What's particularly heartbreaking is how normal everything seemed just days before the tragedy. On March 24th, just one day before Jeremy's death, Khadijah had posted about what a good father he was. She was praising the same man she would kill less than 24 hours later. Think about that for a moment. How does someone go from publicly celebrating their husband's parenting to ending his life in such a short span of time? The answer might lie in what Khadijah discovered about Jeremy's loyalty. In the days leading up to the murder, she had been posting cryptic messages about betrayal and infidelity. She shared a post that read National Sale and Lease Manager F's his employees and tagged Jeremy directly in it. This wasn't subtle. She was calling him out publicly. But it gets worse. Khadijah had screenshots of text messages between Jeremy and another woman. She was collecting evidence, building a case in her mind about his alleged cheating. During that fatal Facebook live stream, you can hear her questioning his loyalty repeatedly. But where is his loyalty? She asked the camera, as if the viewers could somehow validate her pain and justify what was about to happen. Here's what makes this case so tragic and preventable. Jeremy wasn't fighting back during that live stream. He wasn't escalating the situation or threatening anyone. He was doing exactly what domestic violence experts tell people to do. He was trying to remove himself from a volatile situation. He wanted to go to his mother's house, to cool down, to let things settle. But in abusive relationships, leaving can be the most dangerous thing you can do. Statistics show that the risk of homicide increases by 75% when a victim tries to leave their abuser. Jeremy was following the right playbook, but Khadijah wasn't going to let him walk away. She had made up her mind that if she couldn't have him, nobody could. How many of you watching this right now have ignored the warning signs in someone's relationship? How many times have you seen a friend post loving messages about their partner one day, then cryptic quotes about betrayal the next, and you just scrolled past? Jeremy Brown died because the people around him, maybe even Khadijah herself, didn't recognize that they were watching a relationship turn lethal. If you're serious about preventing tragedies like this, hit subscribe and commit to being the kind of person who speaks up when they see the signs. Comment, "I won't stay silent," if you're ready to be part of the solution. Or maybe you think domestic violence is none of your business. Go ahead and tell us in the comments why you choose to look the other way when lives are at stake. March 25th, 2023 started like any other Saturday morning in the Brown household. Jeremy had to be at work by 9 o'clock, but there was tension in the air about responsibilities, money, and priorities. What should have been a routine conversation about household duties and work schedules became the opening act of a tragedy that would shock an entire community. Khadijah decided to broadcast their argument on Facebook Live. She wanted the world to see her side of the story, to validate her frustrations about Jeremy's priorities. She complained about him wanting to go to his mother's house instead of staying home to cook for their 4 children. $7.36. That's all the money they had, and she was angry that Jeremy couldn't even afford to put gas in both their cars while still helping his brother-in-law get to work every day. As the live stream continued, you could hear the frustration building in Khadijah's voice. She was talking to the camera like it was her therapist, airing every grievance she had about their marriage. "He can't even come here and cook for these kids," she complained to her online audience.
For the first time from the mother of a man killed by his wife on Facebook Live.
That crime happened in Columbus, and it is also there where we found out this afternoon the wife's punishment for that crime.
Let's go live to WTVA's Jake White, who was in the courtroom when the judge handed down her sentence.
The crime happened in March of last year. The guilty plea and punishment happened today. Now, the woman that you see on your screen right now, that is Khadijah Brown, the woman from Columbus who shot and killed her husband, Jeremy Brown, on Facebook Live. Yeah, you heard me right. Facebook Live. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder before a more than 90-minute sentencing hearing this afternoon at the Lowndes County Courthouse. Khadijah Brown took the stand during the hearing and was noticeably upset. She told the court she did not mean to shoot her husband in the head. Circuit Judge Michelle Easterling reviewed the Facebook Live video that went viral last year, then sentenced Khadijah Brown to 40 years in prison with 6 years suspended. The victim's mother watched as her son's killer found out her punishment.
I feel justice has been served. I'm very happy, and just glad it's all over. Try to have some type of closure and try to move forward.
We have Jeremy, who was a hard-working man, worked a 9 to 5, provided for his family, took his family to church. In this case, it was so senseless. Just out of that emotional state of being angry, to take him away from his family was very disturbing, and this was a very emotional case.
We learned in court the defendant's 4 children were at home when she killed her husband, and now she'll spend 30 years behind bars away from them for a killing that she says was an accident. Live here in Columbus, Jake White, WTVA 9 News.
Don't touch me again.
Touch you.
Jason, sit there over here. We'll make it easy. Send it over here. I'm finna do it just like that. Send it over here.
Ain't nobody finna come over here and do nothing.
Get your hands off me, bro. Stop touching me. Move.
Jesus, stop.
Send it over here, Joe.
Ain't nobody coming over here.
Oh, me, bro. Sit down. Get your motherfucking hands on me, bro. Stop touching me, bro.
Stop.
Stop touching me.
I'm gonna kill you. Murder scene,
Stop touching me again.
Stop.
Let go. Touch me. Touch me again. Touch me a motherfucking again.
Stop.
Touch me again.
Ain't nobody finna do
Don't go to
nothing.
putting a gun on
Ain't
me.
nobody finna do nothing.
Open this car. Put this car. You got gun.
Ain't
Don't worry
nobody.
about it.
Stop.
Don't worry about it. Touch me
Stop.
again. Touch me again.
Stop. Yeah.
Touch me again.
Yeah. Stop. Yeah,
Touch me
bitch.
again.
Stop.
He got to be at work at 9, but he still got time to cook for these kids. Jeremy was moving around the apartment, trying to get ready for work while his wife broadcasted their private business to strangers. You can hear him in the background, not engaging with her complaints, just trying to go about his morning routine. But Khadija wasn't going to let this go quietly. She kept the camera rolling, kept talking to her viewers, building her case against Jeremy like she was presenting evidence to a jury that would never deliver the verdict she wanted. Then something shifted in the live stream. Jeremy's voice became more prominent as he tried to understand what Khadija actually wanted from him. "What is the conversation you want to have?" he asked repeatedly. It's a question that reveals so much about his character. He wasn't trying to fight. He was trying to communicate. He wanted to resolve whatever was bothering her. But Khadija wasn't interested in resolution. She was interested in confrontation. When Jeremy asked for his phone back, when he tried to gather his belongings, she became more agitated. "Don't touch me," Jeremy said calmly as the situation escalated. "What's the conversation? What's the conversation?" he kept asking, genuinely trying to de-escalate the tension. You can hear the desperation in his voice. This was a man who knew his marriage was in trouble, who knew his wife was angry, but who still believed they could talk through their problems like adults. What makes this live stream so heartbreaking is that you can hear Jeremy's genuine confusion about why this argument was happening. "I ain't trying to argue at all," he said. "I do what I can when I can." He was trying to explain his perspective without attacking Khadija, without making her look bad in front of her online audience. But the most devastating part of this entire situation is knowing that their 4 children were somewhere in that apartment. These kids were listening to their parents fight about money, about loyalty, about who does more for the family. They were hearing their father repeatedly ask what conversation their mother wanted to have, and their mother broadcasting their family's private struggles to strangers on the internet. Jeremy kept saying, "Don't touch me," and "Keep your hands off me," which tells us that Khadija was getting physical even before the fatal moment. The situation was escalating, and Jeremy was trying his best to keep it from getting worse. The final moments of that live stream showed Jeremy doing exactly what domestic violence experts recommend. He was trying to leave. He was gathering his things, preparing to go to his mother's house to let the situation cool down. "I'm getting my stuff," he said, not as a threat, but as a statement of his intention to remove himself from the conflict. This is the part that should make your blood run cold. Jeremy Brown was following the textbook response to domestic violence. He wasn't retaliating. He wasn't escalating. He wasn't trying to hurt anyone. He was a 28-year-old father who just wanted to leave peacefully and come back when emotions weren't running so high. But Khadija had already made her decision. While Jeremy was focused on de-escalation and departure, she was focused on making sure he would never leave her again. The live stream was still running when she made that choice permanent. How many times have you heard your neighbors fighting through the walls, seen bruises that someone explained away, or watched a friend make excuses for their partner's behavior? Jeremy Brown died because people around him, maybe even some watching that live stream, treated domestic violence like entertainment instead of a cry for help. If you're going to watch this story, if you're going to consume Jeremy's final moments, then you better be ready to act when you see the warning signs in real life. Hit subscribe if you're committed to being someone who intervenes instead of just observing. Comment, "I will speak up," if you're ready to be part of the solution. Or maybe you think domestic violence is just drama that doesn't concern you. Go ahead and explain in the comments why you choose to stay silent when lives hang in the balance. The live stream was still rolling when Jeremy made his final attempt to leave peacefully. You can hear him moving around the apartment, gathering his belongings while Khadijah continued her commentary to the camera. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't being aggressive. He was methodically collecting his things like a man who had done this before, like someone who knew that sometimes the best way to save a relationship is to step away from it. What's the conversation you want to have? Jeremy asked one last time. It's haunting to hear those words now, knowing they were among his final attempts at communication. He genuinely believed that if he could just understand what Khadijah wanted, if he could just have the right conversation, they could work through this like they had worked through problems before. But Khadijah had moved beyond conversation. She had moved beyond words entirely. What happened next unfolded in seconds, but those seconds changed everything. Jeremy was near the door, ready to leave for his mother's house, when Khadijah made the decision that would destroy both their lives forever. The viewers watching the live stream heard the argument. They heard Jeremy's attempts to de-escalate, and then they heard something that no one should ever have to witness. A single gunshot. One bullet that ended 28 years of life, 7 years of marriage, and left 4 children without a father. The sound cut through the apartment like a final punctuation mark on an argument that should have ended with Jeremy walking out that door. Instead of going to his mother's house to cool down, instead of coming back later to work things out, Jeremy Brown collapsed in his own home. The live stream kept running. The camera kept recording. The witnesses kept watching. In the immediate aftermath of the gunshot, there was a terrible silence on the live stream. The kind of silence that makes your stomach drop because you know something irreversible has just happened. Jeremy wasn't arguing anymore. He wasn't asking what conversation Khadijah wanted to have. He wasn't trying to leave peacefully or gather his belongings. He was dying on the floor of his own apartment while strangers on the internet tried to process what they had just witnessed. Khadijah had fired one shot, and that was all it took. One moment of rage, one decision made in anger, and a father of 4 was gone forever. The handgun that police would later recover from the apartment had delivered a single, fatal wound. There was no taking it back, no rewinding the live stream, no undoing what had been broadcast to the world. The emergency call came in on the morning of March 26, 2023. Officers from the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office responded to a domestic violence call at the Greentree Apartments in Columbus, Mississippi. When they arrived at the scene, they found Jeremy Brown exactly where he had fallen, pronounced dead from that single gunshot wound. The apartment told the story of what had happened. Jeremy's belongings were scattered around, evidence of his attempt to leave. The handgun was recovered from inside the unit, and somewhere in that same space were 4 children who had just lost their father and were about to lose their mother to the criminal justice system. Khadijah was taken into custody without incident. The woman who had been broadcasting her marital problems to the world just hours earlier was now facing murder charges. The live stream that was supposed to show everyone how wrong she felt had instead documented her own crime. Here's what I need you to understand about this moment. Jeremy Brown didn't have to die. One phone call to a domestic violence hotline, one intervention from a friend or family member, one person brave enough to take the warning sign seriously. Any of these could have changed the outcome. But instead, Jeremy's final moments became content for people to consume and forget. Violence is permanent. Death is permanent. Jeremy will never see his children grow up, never have the chance to work on his marriage, never get to prove he was a good father. If you're going to watch his story, then honor his memory by refusing to stay silent when you see the signs. Hit subscribe if you believe in intervention over entertainment. Comment violence is never the answer if you're committed to speaking up. Or maybe you think it's not your place to get involved. Explain in the comments why you'd rather watch tragedies unfold than prevent them. The investigation into Jeremy Brown's murder was unlike most cases that cross a detective's desk. Usually, investigators have to piece together what happened from witness statements, physical evidence, and forensic analysis. But in this case, the entire crime had been broadcast live on social media. Thousands of people had watched it happen in real time. Sheriff Eddie Hawkins and his team at the Lowndes County Sheriff's Office had the Facebook Live video as their primary piece of evidence. They could hear Jeremy's final words, witness his attempts to de-escalate the situation, and see exactly how Khadijah had chosen violence over letting her husband leave peacefully. The live stream had essentially documented the entire sequence of events leading up to the fatal gunshot. The physical evidence at the Greentree Apartments corroborated everything the live stream had captured. Jeremy's body was found exactly where he had fallen, near the door he had been trying to reach. His belongings were scattered around the apartment, confirming his attempt to gather his things and leave. The handgun used in the shooting was recovered from inside the unit, and ballistics would later confirm it fired the single bullet that killed Jeremy. What made this case particularly straightforward for investigators was the lack of any self-defense claim. The video evidence clearly showed Jeremy trying to de-escalate and leave, not attacking or threatening Khadijah. There was no ambiguity about who the aggressor was or what had motivated the shooting. Khadijah had killed her husband because he wanted to leave, plain and simple. Khadijah Michelle Brown was arrested and charged with murder. At 29 years old, she went from being a wife and mother to being a defendant facing decades in prison. The woman who had been seeking validation from strangers on the internet was now facing the judgment of the criminal justice system. The Columbus community was shaken by the brutality of what had happened. This wasn't a crime that occurred in the shadows. It had been broadcast for everyone to see. Local residents struggled to understand how a domestic argument could escalate to murder so quickly, especially when children were present in the home. Sheriff Hawkins addressed the public, calling Jeremy's death a tragic and senseless murder, and expressing sympathy for his family, while promising that justice would be served. The legal proceedings moved relatively quickly, largely because the evidence was so overwhelming. On a Friday morning, Khadijah appeared before a judge and made a decision that would seal her fate. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, accepting responsibility for taking Jeremy's life. The judge sentenced her to 40 years in prison. She would serve 34 years behind bars, with the final 6 years on supervised release. At 29 years old, Khadijah would be in her 60s before she could fully rejoin society. Her children, who had already lost their father, would grow up visiting their mother in prison. The guilty plea meant there would be no trial, no lengthy court proceedings where Jeremy's final moments would be replayed for a jury. But it also meant that the full story of their relationship's history might never be completely understood. Justice was served, but 4 children are still without both parents. Khadijah got 40 years, but Jeremy got a death sentence for trying to leave peacefully. The system worked exactly as it should have, but it worked too late to save a life that mattered. How many of you demand justice after tragedies like this, but do nothing to prevent them? How many of you share outrage about domestic violence cases, but ignore the warning signs in your own communities? If you're serious about accountability, it starts before someone dies. Hit subscribe if you believe in preventing violence, not just punishing it. Comment justice starts with prevention if you're ready to act before it's too late. Or maybe you think accountability is someone else's job. Tell us in the comments why you prefer reacting to tragedies over preventing them. 40 years. That's what Khadijah Brown received for ending her husband's life in a moment of rage. 34 years behind bars, followed by 6 years of supervised release. She'll be 69 years old when she's finally free to live without restrictions. But let's put that sentence into perspective. Jeremy Brown was 28 when he died. Khadijah will serve more time in prison than Jeremy got to live on this earth. Think about what 40 years means. It's watching your children grow up through prison visits and phone calls. It's missing graduations, weddings, and the birth of grandchildren. It's decades of wondering if that single moment of violence was worth destroying not just Jeremy's life, but her own and her children's futures. The answer, of course, is that it never could have been worth it. But the real victims in this tragedy are the 4 children who lost everything that day. They didn't just lose their father to violence. They lost their mother to the prison system. These kids went from having 2 parents to having none, all because of one terrible decision made in anger. Where are these children now? Who's raising them? Who's explaining to them why daddy isn't coming home and why mommy is behind bars? These are the questions that keep me awake at night when I think about cases like this. Jeremy's children will grow up knowing that their mother killed their father, and that knowledge will shape every relationship they ever have. The trauma doesn't end with a gunshot. It ripples through generations, affecting how these kids will trust, love, and handle conflict for the rest of their lives. The Columbus community was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth about domestic violence. This wasn't something that happened behind closed doors, where people could pretend they didn't know. This was broadcast live, witnessed by thousands, and yet Jeremy still died. The community had to grapple with the fact that awareness doesn't automatically translate to prevention. Local domestic violence organizations saw an increase in calls after Jeremy's death. Some people were finally ready to admit they needed help. Others were calling to report concerns about friends and family members. The tragedy had opened conversations that should have been happening long before Jeremy Brown became a hashtag. But for every person who reached out for help, how many others watched the news coverage, shook their heads in sadness, and then went back to their lives without changing anything about how they respond to domestic violence? Domestic violence doesn't just destroy the people directly involved. It shatters entire families and communities. Jeremy's death created ripples that will be felt for decades. His children will carry this trauma forever. His mother lost her son. His friends lost someone they cared about. And somewhere, other potential victims watched this story and wondered if they'd be next. You want to know what the real tragedy is? Most of you will finish watching this video, feel sad for a few minutes, and then move on with your lives like Jeremy's death taught you nothing. Hit subscribe if you're committed to recognizing that domestic violence affects everyone, not just the people in the relationship. Comment violence destroys communities if you understand that we all have a role to play. Or maybe you think other people's trauma isn't your problem. Explain in the comments why you choose to stay disconnected from your community's pain. Jeremy Brown's death wasn't random. It wasn't unpredictable. There were warning signs that everyone around this couple should have recognized. When someone starts questioning their partner's loyalty publicly on social media, that's a red flag. When they're collecting screenshots of text messages as evidence of cheating, that's escalation. When they broadcast private arguments to strangers online, they're seeking validation for feelings that are becoming dangerous. The most critical warning sign is when leaving becomes the trigger for violence. Jeremy wasn't killed during the height of their argument. He was killed when he tried to walk away. That's the moment when many domestic violence situations turn lethal. If you're in a relationship where your partner monitors your communications, questions your loyalty obsessively, or becomes violent when you try to leave, you need to understand that you're in immediate danger. The safest way to exit these situations is not to announce your intentions or try to have a final conversation about why you're leaving. Contact the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233. They can help you create a safety plan that doesn't involve confronting your abuser. Have important documents ready, identify safe places to go, and never try to leave during a heated argument. Jeremy tried to leave peacefully, but he announced his intentions. That announcement cost him his life. For those of you who aren't victims, but know someone who might be, your role is crucial. Don't wait for someone to ask for help. Most victims never will. If you see the warning signs, if you notice someone making excuses for injuries or their partner's behavior, if you witness public arguments or social media drama that feels dangerous, speak up. You can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline even if you're not the victim. They can guide you on how to approach someone you're concerned about. Local law enforcement can conduct welfare checks if you believe someone is in immediate danger. The key is acting before the situation escalates to violence, not waiting until after someone gets hurt. Bystanders have more power than they realize. If you're watching a live stream where domestic violence is occurring, don't just comment or share. Call 911 immediately. Give them the person's name, location if you know it, and tell them what you're witnessing. Social media platforms also have reporting mechanisms for violent content that can trigger emergency responses. In your daily life, be the person who doesn't ignore raised voices from the apartment next door. Be the friend who asks direct questions when someone shows up with unexplained injuries. Be the family member who doesn't accept "we're just going through a rough patch" as an explanation for concerning behavior. Your intervention could save a life. The resources are out there, but they only work if people use them. The National Domestic Violence Hotline operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Local shelters provide safe housing and legal advocacy. Law enforcement agencies have specialized domestic violence units trained to handle these situations safely. But here's what all these resources can't do. They can't force someone to recognize they're in danger, and they can't make bystanders care enough to get involved. Jeremy Brown had access to all of these resources. What he didn't have was enough time to use them safely, and he didn't have people around him who recognized the urgency of his situation. Jeremy Brown's story ends here, but yours doesn't. You have a choice to make right now. You can close this video, feel sad for a few minutes, and then go back to scrolling through your feed like nothing happened. Or you can decide that Jeremy's death means something, that his children deserve a world where domestic violence is taken seriously before it turns fatal. The next time you see warning signs in someone's relationship, the next time you hear neighbors fighting, the next time a friend makes excuses for their partner's controlling behavior, what are you going to do? Are you going to mind your own business? Or are you going to be the person who speaks up? Here's the truth that makes me sick. Most of you will do nothing. You'll watch stories like Jeremy's, shake your heads in sympathy, and then stay silent when you encounter domestic violence in real life. If you're different, if you're actually going to act when it matters, then prove it. Hit subscribe and commit to being part of the solution. Comment, "I will not stay silent," if you're ready to intervene when lives are at stake. Or go ahead and tell us in the comments why you think it's not your responsibility to protect your community. Jeremy's children are watching to see what kind of world you're going to leave them.